At 4:07 a.m. near the outskirts of Tahanrog, the air was heavy, too quiet. Suddenly, Russian supply convoys escorted by BTRs and Panzer Sony II flooded into the depot, hauling over 3.6 million pounds of fuel and ammunition, enough to fuel a 3-division assault on Zaporizhia. This wasn't routine logistics, it was a southern spearhead meant to tilt the entire front. And then, the silence broke. What followed wasn't just an attack, it was a masterclass in joint warfare. The Russian convoys hadn't even finished unloading when the sky betrayed them. Just 12 minutes after the first truck rolled into Tahanrog's depot, 6 Ukrainian Beaver reconnaissance drones breached the airspace from high altitude, fanning out over a 5-mile grid. Flying alongside them, 2 aging Tuesday 141 jets screened in on low-level runs, broadcasting a massive radar signature meant to mimic a full-scale bombing raid. Russian radar station lit up, believing a major airstrike was inbound. Operators activated the Panzer S-1 systems and fired off multiple 57 E-6 missiles, each costing $60,000 into the empty morning sky. That was the cue. From just above the treetops, a strike package of kamikaze FPV drones, each no bigger than a toolbox, darted through the radar blind spot at under 150 feet, guided by terrain-following AI. Within seconds, they slammed into the fuel tankers at the rear of the Russian column. The first fireball lit up the depot like sunrise. 2 more drones followed, hitting 2 ammo trucks, triggering secondary explosions that tore through the staging area. Before the smoke could settle, tracked recon robots rolled in from concealed ditches near the tree line, their thermal cameras scanning for heat signatures. They transmitted coordinates of still-active machine gun nests and mobile radar trucks deeper inside the compound. The decoy strike had worked. Russia fired at shadows while the real knives slipped in. The flames from the initial drone strikes were still rising when the next wave hit, this time from the dirt, not the sky. With Russian air defenses overwhelmed and distracted, Ukraine deployed its second blade in the ambush. Autonomous ground robots, the size of backpacks, nicknamed Iron Beetles, released from low-flying tactical drones just 300 feet above the tree line. These bots landed softly using micro-parachutes, then scurried on 6 wheels toward the Russian tank yard just east of the depot. Their mission was simple: find, crawl, and kill. One by one, the Beetles slid underneath parked T-90 tanks, latching onto the chassis using magnetized arms. Each carried a shaped charged directional mine pre-programmed to detonate upon engine ignition. The trap was now set, waiting for any Russian crew to so much as turn a key. Meanwhile, from the southwest, 6-man Ukrainian strike teams on dirt bikes sped in across a dry irrigation canal, their engines muffled with improvised suppressors. Using suppressed carbines and short-barrel SMGs, they quietly neutralized 3 Russian guard posts along the perimeter. One team even slipped into a fuel trailer yard, placing thermal charges beneath fuel drums, stacked 2 stories high. These weren't blunt force raids. This was surgical sabotage, executed with ruthless precision. By the time Russian operators began reacting to the initial drone explosions, their internal perimeter had already been compromised. Machine gun nests were silent, fuel yards were rigged. And in the tank yard, no one yet noticed the little metal insects resting beneath $5 million worth of steel. Back in Kyiv, Kyiv Command watched the live drone feeds in silence. Every move had gone to plan so far. But they knew. The deeper you cut into the beast, the louder it thrashes. The real battle hadn't even started yet. The Iron Beetles had done their job. Russian guards were down, fuel yards were rigged, and tanks sat in silence, some already doomed to explode the moment they moved. But now, the operation shifted gears. It was time to break the perimeter. From the tree line near the southern coastline, a column of Ukrainian T-84 Oplot tanks began to roll forward. Behind them, YPR 765 armored personnel carriers, retrofitted for urban assault, advanced in staggered formation. The distance from the staging forest to the outer Russian trench lines was barely 1.2 miles, but every inch would be contested. Overhead, spotter drones circling at 2,000 feet relayed real-time thermal data to a Ukrainian artillery battery 8 miles to the west. Within seconds, self-propelled howitzers opened up. The barrage wasn't random, it was choreographed. Each shell landed with unnerving precision, targeting Russian mortar pits, ATGM nests, and radar trailers, all of which had been identified by the recon robots and drones during the earlier chaos. The Russian defenders barely had time to return fire before their coordinates lit up red on every Ukrainian drone screen. Then came the tanks. The first T-84 crested a low ridge and fired its 125mm gun straight into a fortified machine gun bunker. The impact cracked open the position, sending concrete and steel flying. The Ukrainian armor pushed fast, just 20 yards behind the artillery fire line, gambling on momentum and confusion. Russian infantry attempted to regroup, firing RPGs from behind berms and container stacks, but the YPR carriers unleashed 30mm autocannon fire, sweeping trenches clean before the Ukrainian infantry inside even dismounted. At the center of the advance, one Oplot took a glancing hit from a Russian Kornet missile, but its ERA armor absorbed most of the damage. It kept moving, now less than 900 feet from the depot's southern gate. Ukrainian troops riding inside the YPRs prepped breaching charges, ready to punch through the final fencing. Above, loitering munitions stood by, waiting to dive on any Russian vehicle that dared break cover. In less than 12 minutes, Ukraine had done what many thought impossible. They had armored units within striking distance of Tatarog's main logistics hub, right under the nose of Russia's southern command. And still, Kyiv hadn't played its final card. With Ukrainian armor now less than 300 yards from the southern gate, Russia's command center inside the Tatarog depot finally realized this wasn't a probing raid. It was a full-scale, multi-domain assault. And yet, they still hadn't seen what was coming from above. At 22,000 feet, a pair of MiG-29 fighter jets sliced across the morning sky, running east to west over the depot's airspace. Their mission wasn't to strike, it was to bait. The jets broadcast radar signatures and encrypted targeting links, mimicking an impending cruise missile launch. Within seconds, Russian radar crews locked on, believing high-altitude strikes were inbound. As expected, Boris-Glebsk, 2 electronic warfare units activated across the grid, flooding the 5.8 GHz frequency range with broad-spectrum jamming, aiming to blind any drones or incoming missiles. The trap had sprung, but not on the jets. Flying barely 130 feet off the ground, a Robotic kamikaze drone used the radar chaos as cover. Outfitted with a 10-pound shaped charge warhead, it hugged the terrain like a hawk in a canyon. Its mission: punch a hole straight through the depot's reinforced northern wall. But just as the Robotic crossed the outer fence, its onboard systems lit up rushing jammers had found it. The video feed glitched, GPS flickered, and guidance briefly stalled. And then, the pilot in Kiev flipped the switch. Instantly, the drone severed its wireless link and transitioned to fiber optic control, a physical connection running from a tactical relay point, hidden in a gutted farmhouse just 1.5 miles outside the depot. Radio waves could be jammed, but a beam of light inside a glass thread? Unstoppable. Despite crosswinds rattling the cable and nearby thermal sensors sweeping the sky, the Robotic stayed locked on. Its AI flight controller made hundreds of micro corrections per second, keeping it low, fast, and lethal. Back at the depot, Russian crews were still tracking the MiGs. No one noticed the silent shadow drifting just above the treetops until it was too late. The real sting was already inside the wire. The Robotic was less than 600 feet from its target when everything nearly fell apart. A Russian FPV patrol drone, running a routine thermal sweep from the east, suddenly picked up a heat bloom, the engine signature of the Robotic, as it skimmed above the depot wall. Within seconds, it banked hard and closed in. If it got visual confirmation, the entire operation risked unraveling. Inside a Kyiv basement, the Ukrainian drone pilot's screen flashed red. The AI guidance stuttered, the fiber optic cable rattled with tension, and jamming levels spiked again. He had no time to think, only react. He punched the throttle. The Robotic surged forward, cutting a sharp, gut-wrenching turn between two derelict warehouses barely 20 feet apart, using the concrete walls as both cover and radar shade. The drone's rotors scraped within inches of rusted sheet metal, but the signal held the cable still intact. At that exact moment, Ukraine's Special Forces team, hidden in the tree line to the west, activated their backup plan. A laser designator lit up a decoy drone, already waiting above a nearby building. Its engine flared hot, mimicking the Robotic's thermal signature. The Russian patrol drone took the bait, veering off to chase the ghost. The real drone stayed low, steady, deadly. Below at the depot's north gate, a Russian command truck had just pulled into position, officers inside, unaware of the hunter overhead. The timing was perfect. The Robotic dipped once, locked on, and dove straight into the hood of the command vehicle, its shaped charge punching through steel like butter. But that was just the trigger. Inside the depot wall behind the truck sat hundreds of thousands of pounds of stacked munitions. The chain reaction was instant. A thunderclap ripped across the complex as the initial detonation set off a cascade of secondary explosions. The depot didn't just erupt, it disintegrated in a rolling wave of fire, metal, and shock. And the drone? Gone. Mission complete. The first blast was deafening, but it was only the beginning. For the next 4 minutes, Tahanrog's depot became an open furnace. Stored Grad rockets, stacked by the dozens, ignited in chaotic succession. Some launched straight into the sky, others spiraled off course and slammed into Russian barracks less than 300 yards away, shredding tents, vehicles, and communication trailers. Fire rolled across the complex like a living thing. To make sure no recovery was possible, Ukraine deployed a second kamikaze drone, this one targeting the last remaining communications tower, still standing near the depot's east perimeter. With one final plunge, it crashed into the structure, triggering a second wave of detonations that lit up the horizon. Within minutes, the entire logistics infrastructure of Tahanrog, including fuel depots, radar stations, mobile command units, and underground ammo bunkers, was wiped off the map. All that remained was a 300-foot-wide crater, a pillar of black smoke reaching into the dawn sky, and silence on Russian comms. Back in Kyiv, one HER officer looked at the scorched satellite feed and whispered, "We just turned their fortress into a funeral pyre." And the mission wasn't just successful, it was surgical. Tahanrog, Russia's southern logistics lifeline, was gone. The strike crippled supply routes into Crimea, forcing Moscow to withdraw troops from the Azov axis for at least 3 weeks to regroup. It wasn't just a tactical win, it was a strategic rupture. And yet, even amid the firestorm, Ukrainian soldiers found 2 wounded Russian troops, pulling them from the wreckage and stabilizing them until medics arrived. The message was clear. This war is about precision, not cruelty. As the smoke curled into the dawn sky, a lone recon robot rolled back into the blast zone, transmitting one final signal: mission complete.